Hello folks. So this short video is in response to a challenge that I got from Brian's Logic, who was Brian, who's on Ranty's show just recently. And Brian did quite a lot of work finding out sunsets and sunrises at various places. And the object was to work out how fast the sun was moving across the Earth. And what Brian discovered was that at the center, so having a look at this diagram over here, either this one or this one. Let's go with Brian's view of the Earth. What Brian discovered was that at the equator the sun moved faster, and at each of the tropics the sun was slower. And based on that, Brian still concluded that the Earth must be flat. So what I've done here is I've represented both models so that we can see which one Brian's observation would best suit. So let's have a look at if the Earth was a sphere, how that would work. So while the Earth is rotating once a day, that makes it 15 degrees per hour. So this is a speed everywhere on Earth. So the angular speed is 15 degrees per hour. However, the surface speed is not the same everywhere. In fact, the greatest speed at the surface is at the equator, and lesser speed at Capricorn and Cancer. Wow, this is exactly what Brian discovered. Now, if we account for some of the anomalies that he came across, and that would be his data collecting technique and what is meant by sunrise and what exactly is meant by sunset, and then of course we have to consider elevation as well. If you take all that into account and average it out, as Brian did, the greatest speed was at the equator and the lesser speed was at the tropics. This is precisely what we would expect to happen. Okay, let's have a look at it from a flat Earth's point of view. So this, where the North Pole is at the center, and the tropics radiate out from there. So we've got towns A, B, C would be at the equator. Towns D, E, F would be at the Tropic of Capricorn, and this would match this other one over here, the spherical model, DEF, that would be at Capricorn. ABC would be at the equator, and this GHI represents these three dots over here. I haven't labelled them. Okay, they would be at the Tropic of Cancer. So Brian's observations could well be correct at the equator. So, well, his observations are correct, but his conclusion that the Earth is flat may well be correct at the equator. I can show why they aren't, but let's just say that they turn out to be correct at the equator. They cannot be correct at Capricorn, because in order for the Sun to get from D to E and E to F would have to travel a greater distance, unless the Sun in some magical way speeds up and slows down. So in other words, it would have to slow down at the December solstice and speed up in the northern hemisphere, which then wouldn't make sense in terms of the angular velocity of the Sun. So therefore this absolutely does not make sense on this particular model. Now Brian did try to explain that not only would the Sun have to change its velocity, but Brian explains that the Sun rises, so in other words rises higher and comes lower at different times of the year and at different places on the year. Well, I'm afraid there isn't enough distance, if you like, Brian, for that to make any kind of difference. And if you do the maths on that, it actually makes the whole thing worse. So Brian, I like that you did the research, but your conclusions are wrong. You need to relook at that. Now, let's have a look across here. So over here, I have a question for you, Brian, and you can relate that back to the work that you did, by the way, okay? See if you can make it fit in here. So, half of the Earth at any one time, at any time, during 24 hours, is in darkness, and half of the Earth is in daylight. Now you can see where I'm going with this from my diagram. I would like to know how a round sun manages to produce a semicircular shadow, darkness, or semicircular light. Where is the light if the Sun is over here at the equator? Where is the light over here? How does it happen to be dark over here? If the distance from this part here and that part there, those are the same distances, let's say the Sun is dead center, how come these people who are much closer to the Sun are in darkness? Can you see, Brian, that doesn't make sense, does it? Unless the Sun has a lampshade, or the Sun is semicircular. I'm pretty sure if you have a look at the Sun, it won't be semicircular, and even if it was, that still wouldn't work. The Sun would have to be extremely close to the ground for that to work. I would suggest it would probably be only as high up as your average airliner could go for that idea to work, if the Sun was in fact semicircular. So, where is the lampshade that causes this to happen? I'm afraid it gets worse, Brian. When that sun in your model moves between Capricorn and Cancer, what happens to this dividing line? Does it shift as well? So in a nutshell, Brian, if you care that what you believe is factual, then you have to ask yourself this question. Those sun speeds are one thing, and they clearly show they cannot be on this model. But a much harder question for you to answer would be, how does this work? Now, if you do get a model that makes that work, and suits your observations, that would be incredibly impressive. I guarantee you would be noticed. So, give it a go. Come up with a model that explains how night and day works in a coherent way with how seasons work. What are the observations that we have? And tie that to the observations that you've made yourself, so that both are coherent. And I'll let you off on the Antarctica problem. This is where the light goes for 24 hours. From about 22nd, 23rd of December to about the first week in January. So the sunlight is in the sky for 24 hours, around about 20 degrees off the horizon, for about 2 weeks or so, 3 weeks, just on 2 weeks. 22nd of December, so that's a week to the end, and then a week into January. The sun is 20 degrees or thereabouts above the horizon. After that, as you get further into January, it starts to set. Sets for 10 minutes, comes back up again, sets half an hour, and so on. Keeps doing that until about June, where the sun doesn't come up at all, doesn't rise at all, for roughly the same time. Okay, you need to explain that, but I'm letting you off the hook on the Antarctica bit. Okay? You just explain how half of the Earth is in darkness and half of it's in daylight, given that the sun is at least disc-shaped, if not spherical. How does it do this? And importantly, why can't the people here very close to this dividing line where sun and daylight are divided, why can't they see the sun? Ask yourself that question. That would be intellectually honest. I'm waiting for your reply.